everybody, ladies and gentlemen, guests from near and far. A very warm welcome also from my part to this conference, whose aim is to provide a forum where we can exchange, debate, reflect on ICH and the role of museums in this process. Questions like what is the role of museums, what contribution can they make, how can cooperation be initiated, what form should these cooperations take. Before we start, I would like to give you a brief introduction, take this opportunity to give you an overview over the situation in Switzerland. The task of preserving intangible cultural heritage is neither self-explanatory nor self-evident. Like many other member states, Switzerland has had to struggle with the issue of how the state can support the transmission and ultimately the viability of practices and traditions. Over the next few minutes, I will briefly explain the steps Switzerland has taken to implement the UNESCO Convention. I will focus on 5 aspects: the deliberations leading up to the ratification of the Convention, the prevailing cultural policy context, the creation of an inventory, Switzerland's international commitment, and finally projects which have launched here in conjunction with the Convention. Switzerland ratified the Convention in 2008. For a country with countless cultural traditions and a very long history of fostering their safeguarding, ratifying the convention made good sense. But some questioned that decision at the time. They asked what would be the added value and the cost of the exercise. But providing funding for once is not the primary concern here, but rather officially acknowledging that our cultural heritage extends beyond historic buildings and objects to include knowledge, practices, and customs. It is about affording our living cultural heritage the value and place it deserves, that living cultural heritage which shapes our cultural identity as much as tangible heritage does. This was a new way of thinking for Switzerland, and so the ratification of the Convention constituted a paradigm shift in our cultural policy. Living traditions was top of our agenda during the 2012 to 2015 funding period. As part of this work, we extensively discussed on how we can preserve something which is difficult to pin down, which is often ephemeral and in certain cases even invisible. We think it's not the role of the government to keep cultural practices artificially alive by administering financial injections. What it can do, though, is to make sure that the right conditions are in place to showcase and enhance the value of these practices. In some ways, recognition is an essential factor in the successful transmission and, by extension, preservation of cultural traditions. Therefore, the ultimate goal of all the measures Switzerland has taken up to now is to raise awareness of the importance of ICH. Our efforts regarding ICH are not taken in isolation. Just a few words to give you the cultural policy framework around the ratification. By ratifying the UNESCO Convention on ICH, Switzerland officially recognized the significance of ICH for its cultural identity and cultural diversity. With this in mind, it was a logic step also to ratify the according UNESCO Convention on Cultural Diversity. These two international agreements are mutually complementary, intangible cultural heritage being a reflection or a part of cultural diversity. Both conventions are based on the same idea that all forms of cultural expressions carry equal weight and that preference is not given to particular forms. The term cultural is often associated with elitism, with elites, and with ICH it is totally different. ICH brings in an everyday contemporary culture, like the piece of music we heard today. And in this sense, ICH embraces a much broader understanding of culture. And one of the central aims of our current cultural policy, is the involvement of as many people as possible in the country's cultural life. And this mirrors again the UNESCO Convention, which sees intangible cultural heritage as something that is shared, that is inclusive and actively practiced. Implementing the UNESCO Convention provides an opportunity to raise fundamental questions. What practices do we currently consider important? Which ones might we consider important in the future? Why should we and how can we preserve them? This opens up a more general debate on the importance of cultural heritage beyond its expression in physical form. Access to cultural heritage and a widespread public participation. These are the two main purposes of the so-called Faro Convention, which is at our actual political agenda. In early 2018, we carried out a public consultation on the ratification of this European Convention, and Parliament is set to debate the issue in 2018. Following the ratification in 2008, Switzerland drew up its first inventory in 2012. In 2018, we published an updated version with a special focus on urban traditions like housing cooperatives, technoculture, or urban gardening. The latter will be presented in greater detail this morning. Switzerland has a highly federalist structure. That means that implementation of the UNESCO Convention involves close cooperation between the cantons and the federal government. In this case, the cantons are responsible for selecting the inventory items, while the federal government coordinates the overall process. A steering committee defines the necessary strategic framework. You can see in this scheme the puzzle of the different actors. This form of close cooperation was a new experience for all levels of government in Switzerland. During the initial phase, it proved to be a highly complex undertaking and required considerable effort in terms of communication. However, the advantage was that participants did not see the concept as something prescribed from above, as a top-down process, but swiftly assimilated it like in a capillary action. The List of Living Traditions project is a prime example of a successful federal and cantonal cooperation on cultural policy matters. The inventory contains extensive documentation in the form of texts, videos, images, and audio recordings, and has its own designated website. It is available in 5 languages, Switzerland's 4 national languages, and English. As well as the website, we have created 6 trilingual maps. Each one illustrates the traditions featured on the inventory and endeavors to document in an entertaining and easily accessible way ICH. The maps offer some sort of discovery tour through Switzerland's diverse cultural landscapes and have proved particularly popular with schools. You might have caught a glimpse of the maps on the book table downstairs. In 2014, and as a result of the first inventory, the Federal Council, the government, designated 8 living traditions to go forward for inclusion on the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage. Since 2016, Switzerland has submitted several nominations in succession. At the same time, it has also been part of transnational nominations led by other countries. These are the last two entries on the list on the screen. Here again, the ultimate goal of this commitment on an international level was to bring into the public consciousness the social importance of intangible cultural heritage. These candidates helped us to talk about ICH in Switzerland. Two of the elements here on the screen will be presented this morning later on. The Fête des Vignerons in Vevey, that was the first Swiss inscriptions in the UNESCO list, as well as the joint Swiss-Austrian nomination Avalanche Risk Management, which was submitted in 2017. I would like to conclude with the mention of some accompanying projects. In doing so, we try to convince, to encourage partners in related sections like tourism, arts and crafts, associations, nature parks, to implement with us together, to take an interest in living traditions and the realization of the UNESCO Convention goals, trying to provide that safeguarding intangible cultural heritage becomes an enduring concern in Switzerland. I just mentioned the last examples here on the screens, which all have a direct connection with today's conference. Already back in 2014, the Federal Office of Culture joined forces with the Association of Swiss Museums to organize a conference that explored the issue of presenting and mediating living traditions. The conference findings led to a scientific publication and the creation of a manual for museums on how to handle the subject of living traditions. These two publications you will also find on the book table. In 2015, museums took up the issue and dedicated the annual Museum Day on the topic, and they will again do so in 2019. And again, to lay the groundwork for the first update of the list of living traditions, we decided to encourage a debate on the perception and appreciation of urban intangible cultural heritage. In 2014, we organized a symposium on living traditions in the urban space, findings of which resulted in a further publication. We firmly believe that museums, in their capacity as mediators, amplifiers and multipliers, play a key role, have a key role to play in the preservation of intangible cultural heritage. We therefore salute the decision of the IMP to dedicate this conference to the issues of ICH in the urban space and the contribution that museums can make in this regard. Thank you very much.